Destiny, and you're tuned in to the very first episode of Coaching to Destiny. The purpose of this channel is to create a non-exclusive platform for current coaches and anyone who has a desire to become a coach to find community and to be able to discuss the areas that are most important when it comes to being a coach. And being able to connect everything we know and everything that we're learning to become the best coaches that we can be, and ultimately to keep our passion for coaching burning as we continue to grow. So I decided to kick this channel off with, you guessed it, a story time, and I'm just gonna jump right in. So 2 years ago, I was fired from my first collegiate assistant coaching position, and I was really devastated, and I was really frustrated and really worried about the future of my coaching career, as well as how I was going to survive financially. At the time, I had 2 jobs. I was working part-time as the assistant basketball coach, and I was also working full-time as a special ed parapro. And I'm not sure about where you're at, but where I'm from, special ed parapros don't make much money. And I was really just kind of stressed out in the very beginning of this season. I had just bought a new car, and I had just moved into a new apartment, and I had just been released from the second income that I needed to sustain these things. So during that period of time, what I decided to do was really just press into God, and I decided to spend as much time as I could with Him, whether it was watching YouTube sermons, whether it was attending church, whether it was reading my Bible, whether it was praying and praising and worshiping Him in the comfort of my own home. I did whatever I could to make sure that I felt the closeness and the presence of God during this season, because I really didn't know what direction my life was headed in. I have a daughter, and she's 7, and at the time she was just getting ready to go to kindergarten. And at this particular school she was at, it was very necessary that I was available to help her. And so I wanted to continue coaching, and I'm passionate about it. So I was going to find a way to volunteer or be active in something, but I really just felt like God wanted me to take a break and to really just focus on my daughter. And that in itself was a rough time for me. I remember crying and calling my mom and just telling her, I believe this is what God is telling me to do. And, I really love coaching. I really want to coach, but I just don't think that He wants me to do it right now. So I had to really just give God back the dream and the passion of coaching that He had given me. I had to give it back to Him and trust that He was in control. So during this period of time, like I said, I started to do things that I really enjoyed doing. So I started working out regularly. I started eating healthier. And I eventually started paying my tithes, which is really funny because I really didn't have the money to pay tithes. And I didn't realize how important paying your tithes was until I started paying. And I've been able to see God do some amazing things in my life financially when I decided to trust Him in every area of my life. So I got fired in May, and my daughter started school in August. So in December, I decided that, I just couldn't take it anymore. I needed to find a coaching job. I needed to find more income, and I just really wasn't happy. So I started applying for jobs, and I kept applying, and I kept getting called for interviews, and nothing was happening. And again, it's really frustrating when you're looking for a job and you need more income and nothing is just becoming available. So when I first started my job search, I was looking for coaching jobs. And then it got to a point where I was just trying to find anything within an athletic department that I would enjoy doing. And so months and months passed, and during this time, God was just teaching me things about myself. He was teaching me things about my character. He was teaching me about things that I needed to improve. He was developing perseverance on the inside of me. He was showing that, I still mattered, even though I wasn't doing what I really wanted to be doing. And eventually I became okay with that, and it was a journey to get to that place. As March and April started approaching, I just started sensing in my spirit that change was coming. And the only reason I was able to identify that sense of time was that I had spent so much time with God during this season of my life. And so I remember watching a video by Heather Lindsay about faith. And as she's talking and as she gets to the end, I felt led to take a step of faith. So I knew that my apartment lease would be ending in the end of June. And so this is maybe 2 weeks before the end of April. And for this particular apartment, you had to give them a 60-day notice, or you had to pay for the extra month. And so as I listened to her talk, I felt led to put in my 60-day notice for my apartment. And I remember waiting a few days after, and I even remember calling my mom and asking her, does this sound crazy to you? And I remember her saying, no, it doesn't sound crazy at all. And so at that moment, I decided that, if I felt like that was something that God was telling me to do, that I needed to just go ahead and do it. And so that's what I did. The very last day of April, I turned in my 60-day notice for my apartment, and I didn't have another job, and I didn't know where I would be going. So I even remember going into the leasing office and filling out the paperwork to put in my 60-day notice. And I remember one of the leasing agents for the apartment company asking me, where are you moving to next? Because they needed to write it down as a forwarding address. And as he's asking me this, only thing I could reply was that I didn't know. And it sounded crazy, but I just know that, crazy is something that God specializes in. And I remember a short period after that, I started reading in the Bible about Abraham. And there's a scripture in Genesis 12:1 that says, "The Lord has said to Abram, leave your native country, your relatives, and your father's family, and go to the land that I will show you." And to me, it was very significant because that meant that Abraham was in the same place that I was in. He was in a place of feeling like something was changing, like he was supposed to go somewhere, but he didn't have clear directions. And God just told him to go, and I will show you. And so after reading that, I really felt at peace about doing what I believed that God was telling me to do. And I was able to just keep seeking him to figure out where it was he wanted me to go. So that's the end of April. I turned in my 60-day notice. So after I fill out the 60-day notice, my 1-year mark reaches for when I was fired from my last job. And I remember writing a post on Facebook where I was just letting everyone know that, although I had went through a difficult season in my life, that I knew that God was teaching me things, and that, this was the most that I've ever learned about God and my relationship with him in this past year than any other time in my life. And that I was just so grateful for everything that he gave me in this season of me just not doing anything. Maybe toward the middle of May, a coaching job pops up out of nowhere, but there's only 1 week left before the post close. And immediately I felt fear. And I felt fear because of the past experience I had with coaching, and I didn't know how this situation was going to turn out. But I remember calling my dad, and I said, Dad, I'm nervous, and I feel a little fear about applying for this. And I remember him saying something that I'll never forget. And he said, "You act like you're going to be coaching against Pat Summitt." And I died. I literally died laughing so hard because I had this fear about facing people that I didn't need to worry about. I didn't need to worry about them. I just needed to keep pursuing what I felt like God was telling me to do. And at the time, Pat Summitt was living. So it made me feel so much better knowing that I wasn't going to have to coach against Pat Summitt in my very first year of coaching. So I did all the work I needed to do. I did the application. I turned everything in. And that was around May 22nd. Around June 1st, June 2nd, I received a call saying that I had made it to the portion of the job process where I would be, interviewed. And so they called me and I set up the interview. And the next Monday, which was maybe like the 5th of June, I went in for the job interview. It was about a 3-hour drive from where I currently lived. And I went to the interview and everything went good. And as I got home, I felt peace about how I did and the answers I gave. And I told myself that if I got a second interview, that I knew for a fact that this was my job. So 2 days later, I got called for the second interview to meet with the president of the college. And at that moment I got called, I knew for a fact that the job was mine. So I went in for my second interview. I met with the president. Like I said, I felt peace even after that second interview. I went home and I talked to my parents and I was like, this is one of the things I was concerned about. Was there was a salary range for the job, and I wanted the very highest of the salary range. So I was talking with my parents and figuring out, how could I present to them that I want to be paid the full amount, just in case they called me and offered me the job. But like I said, I was pretty sure at this moment that the job was mine. So the next day, which was a Friday, I got called and I was offered the position as the head coach of this college. And not only did they offer me the head coaching position, but they offered me the maximum salary for the position. Now, talk about God going before you and making the crooked path straight. He literally did all of the work, and I just had to be obedient and trust that he was going to do what was best for me, and he did just that. So 2 weeks before, my lease is up, I get hired as a full-time head women's basketball coach. And I knew that it was something that only God himself could do, because the odds of getting a job after not coaching for a year and just being freshly new into coaching, it blew my mind. So there were 5 things that I learned from this experience with God. And number 1 was that he does hear me when I pray and I talk to him. A lot of times he doesn't answer us when we want him to answer, but he does hear us. And he does answer in his own timing. Number 2, I learned that there were things about my character that needed developing for me to sustain this new season that he would be bringing me in. And I'm so grateful for him taking that time with me to grow and stretch me and develop me in those areas that I needed work in. Number 3, I learned that his timing is perfect. We try to rush into things sometimes and we're just not ready. And God, being sovereign and knowing all things, he allows us to go through his process so that we get there and we're able to, do well in what he's placed us in. Number 4, what I learned is that what God has in store is so much better than what we could ever imagine or think or even ask him for. And he wants the very best for us, and he withholds nothing good from us. And the 5th thing that I learned was that family is so crucial. And when I say family, I mean blood and not blood, because there is a lady that I worked with for the past 2 years that means the absolute world to me. I needed her in this season of my life, and she has become family to me, and I love her dearly, and she knows who she is. So thank you so much for being a part of my life and for investing in me and encouraging me in those times where I just needed someone. And to my parents, you guys are awesome, awesome, awesome. I don't know where I'd be without you guys, and I pray that I get to have you for many, many more years as I continue on this journey of coaching. So I'd like to say in closing that if any of you feel like God is telling you to step out in faith and to do something, then you just need to do it. Yes, you could be wrong. Yes, that may not be what God is telling you to do, but there are always benefits in trying to step out in faith and doing what you think God is telling you versus being complacent and afraid and never experiencing God do anything. And that was one of the biggest things during this season of my life is I was excited and I was happy to hear encouraging stories of things that God had done for other people, but I wanted God to do something in my own life, and I wanted to experience him and have my own story. And so that's exactly what he gave me as I pursued, my relationship with him and walking and stepping out in faith. And so this is the end of this video. I look forward to seeing you guys on the next video, where I'll be discussing the 10 things that I learned in my first year as a head coach. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.